Have you ever wondered why a life that looks so safe from the outside can feel so suffocating on the inside? Why people with stable jobs, fixed salaries, and predictable routines still wake up tired, anxious, and quietly dissatisfied even though they did everything society told them was right? From childhood, we're taught that safety means certainty. Study hard, get good grades, secure a job, earn every month, and you will be protected from chaos. This idea sounds logical, responsible, even mature. But what if that definition of safety is the very thing keeping people trapped? The safe life promises comfort, but delivers control. It tells you that exchanging your time for money is stability, when in reality, it's dependency. You depend on a paycheck, a boss, an economy, and systems you don't control. The moment any one of those shifts, the illusion cracks. Most people aren't chasing freedom. They're chasing approval. Approval from parents, relatives, colleagues, and society. The script rewards obedience with applause, promotions, titles, and compliments. But applause doesn't equal freedom. It only means you're following the rules well. Safety, as society defines it, is about minimizing discomfort, not maximizing life. It avoids uncertainty, even if that uncertainty is where growth lies. So people choose predictability over potential, routine over meaning, and comfort over purpose. Then wonder why life feels empty. The illusion of safety is powerful because it feels responsible. It feels adult. It feels smart. Yet the same structure that promises protection slowly removes choice. Fixed schedules, fixed incomes, fixed paths until one day you realize your life is predictable but not intentional. This isn't about quitting jobs or rejecting responsibility. It's about questioning assumptions you never chose. It's about asking whether the life labeled safe is actually serving you or simply keeping you manageable, dependent, and afraid to step outside the lines. When you stop and look closely, you'll notice something uncomfortable. The riskiest decision most people make is never deciding at all. They inherit a life template, follow it carefully, and call it security without realizing they've traded possibility for permission. Unscripted thinking begins with this awareness. Safety is not the absence of danger. It's the presence of control. And a life without control, no matter how stable it looks, is fragile. Real security comes from adaptability, ownership, and the ability to choose. As we go deeper, you'll start to see how many beliefs you accepted without question, and how quietly they shaped your decisions. This isn't about fear. It's about clarity. Because once you see the illusion, you can never unsee it. Today's journey isn't about motivation or rebellion. It's about awareness. When awareness changes, choices change automatically. You don't need to destroy your life to question it. You only need the courage to look honestly at the trade-offs you've been making. Comfort for growth, approval for authenticity, certainty for possibility. This conversation isn't here to judge where you are. It's here to show you that alternatives exist, and that the first escape from the rat race happens in the mind long before it happens in reality. But before we begin, I highly recommend wearing your earphones. 'Cause when you watch a video, then you're just only consuming visuals. But when you listen, then your brain starts working to understand the deeper meaning of the content. And trust me, the visuals created inside your mind are 10 times more powerful than visuals you see on a screen. Once you begin to notice this illusion of safety, something interesting happens. You start seeing patterns everywhere. Patterns in conversations, in expectations, in the way people plan their entire lives almost automatically. This is where the idea of a scripted life becomes impossible to ignore. Most people believe they are making independent choices. They think they chose their career, their lifestyle, their priorities. But if you trace those decisions backward, you'll often find they were pre-approved choices, options placed in front of them long before they were old enough to question anything. Study this. Choose from these careers. Earn this much. Live like this. Retire at this age. The path is already drawn. You're just asked to walk it. A scripted life doesn't feel forced because it's socially rewarded. When you follow the script, people nod in approval. You're called responsible, settled, or doing well. Deviating from it, however, invites confusion and concern. Suddenly, people ask if you're being realistic, if you're taking unnecessary risks, or if you've lost your way. The script protects itself by making alternatives look dangerous. The most powerful part of the script is that it's invisible. No one explicitly tells you that you're not allowed to design your own version of life. Instead, the system overwhelms you with expectations so early that questioning them feels unnatural. By the time adulthood arrives, most people are already locked into paths they never consciously selected. An unscripted life isn't about chaos or irresponsibility. It's about awareness. It begins when you realize that normal is just the most common choice, not necessarily the best one. Normal is working 5 days for 2 days of freedom. Normal is postponing life for weekends and vacations. Normal is waiting decades to finally live the way you want if health and energy still allow it. The script convinces people that there's only one respectable way to succeed. But respectability and fulfillment are not the same thing. A life can look impressive on paper and still feel hollow internally. That hollow feeling is often the first signal that the script no longer fits. When you start questioning the script, discomfort appears. Uncertainty feels scary because the script provided clear instructions. Without it, you must think, decide, and take responsibility. That responsibility is exactly what most people unconsciously avoid. It's easier to follow a path than to create one. Unscripted thinking asks a simple but unsettling question. If no one were watching, would I still choose this life? For many, the honest answer is no. And that realization alone can shake years of assumptions. This isn't about rejecting society. It's about refusing to live unconsciously. The moment you see that your life doesn't have to follow a pre-written narrative, possibility expands. You begin to understand that fulfillment doesn't come from fitting in perfectly, but from aligning your life with your values, curiosity, and desired level of freedom. The difference between a scripted and an unscripted life isn't income or status. It's authorship. One is lived by default. The other is lived by design. And once you recognize that distinction, you can't help but question how much of your time, energy, and potential is truly yours and how much of it is simply being spent playing a role you never auditioned for. Once you step outside the script and begin questioning who's really writing your life, another realization quietly hits you. Almost everything revolves around time, not money, not status, time. Yet, it's the one resource most people treat as if it's unlimited. We're taught to think of money as the ultimate currency. Earn more, save more, invest more. But money can be regained. Time cannot. Every hour spent is gone forever. And still people casually give away the best hours of their lives in exchange for numbers on a screen, assuming they'll buy their freedom back later. This is where the biggest misunderstanding lies. People don't actually sell their skills at work. They sell their time. Skills could be leveraged, scaled, or multiplied. Time can only be spent once. When you trade time directly for money, you lock your income to your presence. No presence, no pay. That's not security. That's a fragile arrangement, disguised as stability. The common promise is work hard now, enjoy later. But later is never guaranteed. Health changes, energy fades, responsibilities grow, and often by the time people reach the age they were told freedom would arrive, they're too tired, too conditioned, or too afraid to use it. Most lives are structured around postponement. 5 days of work for 2 days of rest. 50 weeks of effort for 2 weeks of escape. Decades of sacrifice for a retirement that may or may not deliver what was imagined. This isn't patience. It's delay dressed up as discipline. Time ownership is the foundation of an unscripted life. Not leisure, not laziness. Ownership, the ability to decide how your day unfolds without asking permission. The power to redirect your attention when curiosity strikes. The freedom to say no without fear of survival consequences. People often confuse being busy with being productive. But busyness is frequently just obedience to a schedule you didn't design. A full calendar can still represent an empty life if none of that time is spent on things that compound, grow, or align with your values. Unscripted thinking reframes time as an asset that should work for you, not be consumed by others. Instead of asking how much does this pay, the better question becomes what does this cost me in time and what does it give back in the long run? When time is treated as disposable, life becomes reactive. You respond to alarms, deadlines, emails, and expectations. When time is treated as precious, decisions become intentional. You start protecting your attention. You stop saying yes automatically. You begin designing days instead of surviving them. This awareness can feel uncomfortable because it exposes how casually we've been spending something irreplaceable. But discomfort is useful. It signals that a deeper recalibration is happening. You're no longer measuring life by income alone, but by autonomy, presence, and the ability to choose. The rat race survives because people believe time will eventually be returned to them as a reward. Unscripted living understands a harsher truth. Time is never returned. It must be claimed early, protected deliberately, and invested wisely. And once you truly grasp that time, not money, is the real currency, your priorities shift naturally. You stop chasing speed for its own sake. You stop glorifying exhaustion. You start asking a quieter, more powerful question. Is this how I want to spend a piece of my life that I'll never get back? As your relationship with time begins to change, Another deeply ingrained belief starts to crack. The idea that hard work alone guarantees success. From childhood, effort is praised above everything else. Work harder than others, stay busy, push through exhaustion, and eventually life will reward you. It sounds fair. It sounds moral, but it's also deeply misleading. Hard work is not the problem. Blind hard work is. Millions of people work incredibly hard every single day. They wake up early, commute long hours, handle pressure, and give their best energy to their jobs. Yet, many of them remain financially stressed, time poor, and dependent. If hard work were the answer, these people would be the most free. Instead, they're often the most trapped. The issue isn't effort, it's leverage. When effort is directly tied to hours, output is capped. No matter how disciplined or talented you are, there are only so many hours in a day. Once those hours are sold, your earning potential hits a ceiling. This is why some of the hardest working people earn the least, while others earn more with far less visible effort. Society romanticizes hustle because hustle keeps systems running. It rewards those who show up consistently, follow instructions, and don't ask uncomfortable questions. Hustle makes you reliable, but reliability doesn't equal ownership. You can be extremely valuable to a system without having any control within it. There's also a dangerous pride attached to suffering. Being overworked is worn like a badge of honor. Exhaustion is mistaken for progress. But burning yourself out for someone else's goals is not ambition. It's misdirected loyalty. Unscripted thinking doesn't reject effort. It redirects it. It asks where your effort is going and what it's building. Is your hard work creating something that grows without you? Or does it reset to zero every day? Are you investing energy into assets, skills, or systems, or are you just maintaining a cycle? This is where the difference between working hard and working with leverage becomes clear. Leverage allows one unit of effort to produce results repeatedly. It could be a system, a business, intellectual property, or a scalable skill. Without leverage, effort is consumed once and gone forever. Just like time, many people are conditioned to believe that struggling longer is noble. But struggle without direction doesn't build freedom. It builds tolerance for limitation. You get better at surviving, not at escaping. The real trap is that hard work feels productive. It feels virtuous. It keeps you busy enough to avoid deeper questions. Questions like, is this leading anywhere? Or who actually benefits most from my effort? When those questions are avoided, years can pass quickly. This doesn't mean quitting responsibility or chasing shortcuts. It means understanding that effort should compound, not evaporate. The goal isn't to work less today. It's to work in a way that reduces forced work tomorrow. Unscripted living challenges the idea that suffering now automatically equals freedom later. It teaches that freedom is engineered, not earned through exhaustion. Effort should buy options, not obligations. When you stop glorifying hard work for its own sake, clarity replaces guilt. You no longer feel lazy for wanting leverage. You no longer feel irresponsible for questioning grind culture. You begin to see that the ultimate purpose of work is not to stay busy, but to build a life where your time, energy, and choices increasingly belong to you. At some point, even after working hard and staying busy, a strange question surfaces. Why does it still feel like there's never enough? Enough money, enough peace, enough breathing room. The answer often has nothing to do with income and everything to do with consumption. Modern life quietly trains people to spend first and think later. From the moment money comes in, it's already assigned a destination. Bills, subscriptions, upgrades, celebrations, conveniences. Spending is normalized, encouraged, even celebrated. Saving or restraint, on the other hand, is treated like deprivation. This mindset turns earning into a never-ending chase. Consumerism is powerful because it disguises itself as happiness. Buy this and life improves. Own that and status increases. Upgrade again and you'll finally feel satisfied. But satisfaction never arrives because the system isn't designed to fulfill. It's designed to repeat. The trap isn't buying things. It's believing that buying things equals progress. A bigger house often comes with bigger pressure. A better car brings higher maintenance. A more impressive lifestyle demands a higher monthly burn rate. Slowly, freedom is exchanged for appearances, and people don't even notice when it happens. What makes consumerism especially dangerous is how early it attaches itself to identity. People don't just buy products, they buy validation. The right phone, the right clothes, the right lifestyle signal success to the outside world. But signals don't create security. They create expectations that must be maintained. This is how income increases but stress remains. More money simply fuels more consumption. The finish line keeps moving and the race never ends. Instead of using money as a tool to buy freedom, It becomes a leash that pulls people back into work they don't enjoy, just to sustain lifestyles they no longer question. Unscripted thinking exposes a simple truth. Every recurring expense is a claim on your future time. EMIs aren't just financial commitments. They're promises of continued obedience. The more fixed expenses you carry, the fewer choices you have. You don't just own things. Things own your schedule, your decisions, and your tolerance for risk. Minimalism in this context isn't about sacrifice. It's about strategy. Reducing unnecessary consumption lowers the amount of income required to survive. And when survival costs less, freedom becomes more achievable. Fewer obligations mean more flexibility. More flexibility means more control. Consumer culture teaches people to upgrade their lives before upgrading their leverage. Unscripted living flips this order. It prioritizes independence over impressions, optionality over luxury, and long-term control over short-term pleasure. There's also a psychological shift that happens when consumption slows down. You begin to distinguish between wants and needs. You become less reactive to marketing, trends, and social comparison. Money stops being something that disappears and starts becoming something that works. The rat race depends on high consumption. When people spend everything they earn, they must keep running. But when spending becomes intentional, the race loses its grip. Suddenly fewer hours are required. Fewer compromises are necessary. Risk becomes manageable. This isn't about rejecting comfort. It's about choosing it consciously. True comfort isn't found in constant upgrades. It's found in knowing you can walk away if you need to. And that confidence doesn't come from how much you own, but from how little you actually need to keep living on your own terms. There comes a moment when people finally start earning more and instead of relief, they feel an unexpected pressure. On paper, everything looks fine, sometimes even impressive. Yet, the sense of being trapped doesn't disappear. This is where the confusion between income and wealth becomes impossible to ignore. Income is what comes in. Wealth is what stays and, more importantly, what gives you options. Society conditions people to chase income as if it were the ultimate goal. Higher salary, bigger package, better designation. But income alone doesn't create freedom. It often increases dependency. The higher the income, the higher the expectations, responsibilities, and obligations attached to it. This is why many high earners still feel stuck. Doctors, executives, specialists, and professionals can earn more in a month than others do in a year. Yet, they remain bound to their schedules. Miss a day and income drops. Step away for too long and everything pauses. Their earnings look powerful, but their time tells a different story. Wealth works differently. Wealth doesn't require your constant presence to exist. It continues, grows, or at least sustains itself even when you step back. It gives you breathing room. It gives you the ability to make decisions without immediately calculating survival costs. That ability choice is the real indicator of wealth. Unscripted thinking shifts focus from how much do I make to how dependent am I. Dependence is the hidden metric no one talks about. If one source controls your entire livelihood, no matter how big that source is, your position is fragile. The system doesn't need to collapse completely. Small changes are enough to shake everything. High income can even become a trap known as the golden handcuffs. The lifestyle grows, commitments expand, and suddenly walking away feels impossible. Not because of lack of opportunity, but because the cost of leaving feels too high. Comfort turns into a cage that looks luxurious from the outside. Wealth, on the other hand, is about optionality. The option to slow down, the option to change direction, the option to say no. Even modest wealth can create more freedom than a large paycheck if it reduces reliance on constant effort. This is why some people with lower visible income live more freely than those earning far more. Another difference lies in durability. Income is vulnerable to external factors, markets, policies, health, management decisions. Wealth is designed to absorb shocks. It doesn't panic at disruption. It adapts. That resilience is what allows people to stay calm when circumstances change. Most people never consciously pursue wealth because income feels immediate and measurable. Wealth feels abstract and slow. But what's slow often compounds and what's immediate often plateaus. The unscripted path favors long-term control over short-term validation. This doesn't mean rejecting income. Income is a tool. But when income becomes the destination, freedom is delayed indefinitely. Wealth turns income into a servant rather than a master. It allows you to use money strategically instead of chasing it reactively. The rat race thrives on this confusion. As long as people equate earning more with being free, they'll keep running faster on the same track. Unscripted living breaks that loop by redefining the finish line, not as the highest paycheck, but as the point where your life decisions are no longer dictated by the fear of losing one. Eventually, when the difference between income and wealth becomes clear, attention shifts to something even more fundamental: control. Not control over others, but control over your own outcomes. This is the quiet element missing from most lives. And once you notice it, you start seeing how much of daily existence is shaped by forces you didn't choose. Control shows up in simple ways. Who decides when your day starts? Who decides how long you can rest, where you must be, and what happens if you say no? These questions reveal more about freedom than any motivational quote ever could. A life that looks comfortable can still be tightly controlled by schedules, approvals, and dependencies. Most people don't lack talent or ambition. They lack autonomy. They are skilled, experienced, and hardworking. Yet their options are narrow. Decisions are filtered through fear. Fear of losing income, status, or stability. When fear sits at the center of decision, control quietly slips away. Unscripted thinking defines freedom very differently from how society does. Freedom isn't unlimited leisure or doing nothing. It's the ability to choose your next move without begging permission or risking survival. It's knowing that if circumstances change, you can adapt rather than panic. Dependency is modern slavery, but it's subtle. There are no chains, only incentives. A paycheck, benefits, routines, and social approval keep people compliant. The arrangement feels fair because it's normalized. Yet, normalization doesn't equal empowerment. When one system controls your time and income, it controls your leverage. This is why ownership matters more than participation. Participation keeps you involved. Ownership gives you influence. When you own even a small part of a system, you gain a say in outcomes. When you only participate, outcomes are decided elsewhere. The difference between the two determines how much control you actually have. Control also reduces anxiety. Much of modern stress doesn't come from working hard. It comes from feeling replaceable, from knowing that decisions affecting your life are being made in rooms you're not invited into. When control increases, fear decreases, even if income hasn't dramatically changed yet. Unscripted living prioritizes building positions where control grows over time. That might mean diversifying income sources, developing independent skills, or creating systems that don't collapse when you step away. The exact method matters less than the direction away from dependence toward choice. It's important to understand that control doesn't arrive all at once. It's accumulated. Small increases in autonomy compound. One decision that reduces reliance leads to another. Over time, the fear of disruption fades because disruption no longer equals disaster. Society often warns that too much control is unrealistic or selfish. But what's rarely questioned is why surrendering control is praised as maturity. Being responsible shouldn't mean being powerless. Stability shouldn't require silence. Security shouldn't demand obedience. When you regain control, even partially, something shifts internally. You stop overreacting to external pressure. You stop chasing validation so aggressively. You become less desperate for certainty because you trust your ability to respond. The rat race depends on people confusing comfort with control. As long as life feels manageable, questions stay quiet. Unscripted thinking wakes those questions up, not to create chaos, but to restore authorship. True freedom isn't about escaping responsibility. It's about choosing responsibility instead of inheriting it. And the moment you begin building a life where your outcomes aren't entirely decided by someone else, you step out of the race, not by running faster, but by changing direction. As control slowly increases, fear starts losing its grip. And that's when the conversation around risk changes completely. Most people are taught to treat risk as the enemy, something to be avoided at all costs. Stability is praised, caution is rewarded, and stepping outside the approved path is labeled dangerous. But this framing hides a deeper truth. Avoiding risk doesn't eliminate danger. It simply chooses a different kind of risk, one that's quieter and easier to ignore. Society trains people to fear visible risks like starting something new or stepping away from a familiar structure. These risks feel dramatic because they demand conscious decisions. What's rarely discussed are invisible risks: relying on a single income, trusting long-term promises from systems you don't control, or assuming the future will look like the past. These risks don't announce themselves, but they accumulate silently. A safe job can disappear. An industry can shrink. Health can change. Technology can replace roles overnight. None of these are extreme scenarios anymore. They're common. Yet, people accept them without question because they happen slowly and collectively. When everyone faces the same risk, it feels normal, even when it's severe. Unscripted thinking doesn't glorify recklessness. It distinguishes between blind risk and calculated risk. Blind risk ignores consequences. Calculated risk studies them. The problem isn't taking risks. It's taking risks unknowingly. And doing nothing is still a decision with consequences of its own. What keeps most people frozen isn't danger, but uncertainty. The script provides certainty, even if it's limiting. It tells you what to do next, what success should look like, and how long to wait for rewards. Walking away from that certainty feels uncomfortable because it requires self-trust. And self-trust isn't taught. It's developed through experience. Ironically, the longer someone stays inside the script, the harder uncertainty feels. Dependency increases sensitivity. When your entire life rests on one structure, any disruption feels catastrophic. This is why small controlled risks are powerful. They build resilience. They teach you that setbacks are survivable, adaptable, and often educational. The biggest lie about risk is that it's evenly distributed. It's not. Those with fewer options carry more risk. Even when their lives appear stable, those with multiple paths, skills, or systems can absorb shocks. Risk doesn't disappear, it shifts. Unscripted living is about shifting risk away from total dependence and toward manageable experimentation. Fear also shrinks when you realize that most safe paths delay risk rather than remove it. They push uncertainty into the future where it becomes harder to handle. Taking initiative earlier spreads risk over time, making it lighter and more flexible. This is why comfort can be dangerous. Comfort dulls urgency. It convinces people that change can wait. But waiting doesn't make transitions smoother. It often makes them sharper. The longer you postpone discomfort, the less capacity you have to handle it when it finally arrives. Unscripted thinking reframes courage. Courage isn't about dramatic leaps. It's about consistent movement despite incomplete information. No meaningful path comes with guarantees. Clarity is often the reward for action, not the requirement before it. When you accept that uncertainty is unavoidable, fear loses its power to paralyze. You stop asking for perfect conditions. You start building adaptability instead. You learn to see mistakes as data, not disasters. Each decision strengthens your ability to respond rather than your need to predict. The rat race survives on exaggerated fear. Fear of failing, fear of judgment, fear of instability. But once you understand that obedience carries its own hidden risks, the narrative changes, risk stops being a wall and becomes a tool. And in that shift, something important happens. You stop trying to avoid life's unpredictability and start preparing for it. Not with anxiety, but with flexibility. Not with blind hope, but with deliberate action. That's when risk stops controlling you and starts working for you. After your relationship with risk changes, the next realization feels almost obvious in hindsight. Freedom doesn't come from effort repeated endlessly. It comes from structures that keep working even when you step back. This is where the idea of systems enters the picture, not as a business buzzword, but as a survival upgrade. Most people live inside a loop. Work, get paid, rest, repeat. When the loop stops, income stops. This creates constant pressure to stay active, available, and responsive. Life becomes reactive instead of intentional. Systems exist to break this loop. A system is simply something that produces results without requiring your constant attention. It doesn't mean zero work. It means front-loaded work. You build once, refine slowly, and benefit repeatedly. Jobs don't work this way. Businesses, processes, and scalable structures do. The reason systems feel intimidating is because they demand thinking before doing. They require planning instead of just showing up. And thinking is uncomfortable when you've been conditioned to measure value by visible effort. But effort that doesn't compound eventually exhausts you. Unscripted thinking asks a practical question. If I stop working for a week, what breaks? For most people, the honest answer is everything. That answer reveals dependence, not failure. It simply shows that life has been built around activity instead of structure. Systems shift the focus from being needed to being effective. When you are needed every moment, you are replaceable. When a system needs maintenance rather than presence, you gain leverage. Leverage is what turns time into an ally instead of a liability. This doesn't require massive companies or complex automation. Systems can be simple. A repeatable process, a skill packaged once and delivered many times, a workflow that reduces decision fatigue. The scale matters less than the direction away from constant labor toward repeatable outcomes. One of the biggest mental shifts here is detaching identity from effort. Many people unconsciously believe that if they're not busy, they're not valuable. Systems challenge that belief. They reward clarity, design, and patience more than exhaustion. This feels uncomfortable at first because it removes the familiar validation of working hard. Another benefit of systems is emotional stability. When income or results aren't tied to daily performance, pressure reduces. You make better decisions. You think long-term. You're less reactive to short-term fluctuations because survival no longer depends on perfect execution every single day. Unscripted living doesn't promise immediate freedom. It promises progress toward it. Systems grow slowly at first. They test patience, but over time they do something jobs never can. They decouple effort from reward. That decoupling is where freedom begins. This is also where delegation becomes possible. When work is systemized, it can be transferred. When it lives only in your head or hands, it can't. Systems allow others to contribute without breaking consistency. That's how scale happens. Not through personal heroics, but through design. People often delay building systems because results aren't instant. But instant results usually reset quickly. Systems compound quietly. What looks insignificant early can become foundational later. The tragedy is not that systems take time. It's that most people never start. The rat race depends on people believing that showing up forever is normal. Systems offer an alternative. Build once, improve occasionally, benefit continuously. They don't eliminate work. They make work meaningful. When systems start replacing constant effort, something subtle changes. You stop feeling hunted by the clock. You stop measuring days by exhaustion. You begin to experience space. Space to think, adjust, and choose. That space isn't laziness. It's strategic breathing room. And once you taste that, it becomes clear. Freedom isn't about escaping work entirely. It's about escaping work that resets to zero every day. Systems ensure that today's effort makes tomorrow easier. And that single shift changes everything. By the time everything comes together, time, leverage, control, risk, and systems, one final shift becomes unavoidable. The definition of success itself begins to change. What once looked impressive no longer feels meaningful. What once felt impossible now feels negotiable. This is where the unscripted path truly separates from the race. Most people inherit their definition of success without questioning it. Good income, social respect, predictable life, applause from others. On the surface, it looks reasonable. But beneath it lies a problem. This version of success is external. It depends on validation, comparison, and approval. And anything that depends on others can be taken away. Unscripted thinking asks a different question. Not how successful do I look, but how free do I feel? Freedom doesn't mean escaping responsibility. It means choosing it consciously. It means your lifestyle isn't held together by fear of losing income. It means you can adjust your direction without everything collapsing. True success is personal, not performative. It's waking up without dread. It's having the space to think. It's being able to slow down when life demands it or speed up when opportunity calls without panic. It's not needing permission to live differently. This is uncomfortable for many people because redefining success forces honesty. It exposes how much effort went into meeting expectations that weren't truly yours. It highlights how often decisions were made to avoid judgment rather than to build fulfillment. But that discomfort is productive. It clears space for intentional living. And unscripted life isn't perfect or easy. It has uncertainty. It has responsibility. It demands awareness. But it also offers alignment. When your work, time, and values point in the same direction, friction reduces. You no longer feel split between who you are and what you do. Success in this sense becomes sustainable. It doesn't rely on constant proving. It doesn't demand endless upgrades. It doesn't trap you in comparison loops. It's quieter but stronger. It grows from internal clarity instead of external pressure. This doesn't mean rejecting ambition. It means aiming ambition at the right target. Not just more money, but more optionality. Not just recognition, but resilience. Not just achievement, but authorship over your own life. The rat race thrives because people chase goals without questioning their cost. Unscripted living flips that equation. It measures success by how much life you get to live, not just how much you earn, by how much control you hold, not how busy you appear. And the most powerful part, this version of success isn't reserved for a select few. It doesn't require perfection, privilege, or sudden transformation. It starts with awareness, with questioning assumptions, with small decisions that reduce dependence and increase choice. Once you redefine success for yourself, comparison loses power. Pressure fades. Urgency becomes intentional instead of anxious. You stop running because others are running. You move because it aligns with the life you're building. That's the real escape. Not quitting everything overnight, but stepping out mentally, then structurally, then gradually in reality. The unscripted path doesn't ask you to rebel loudly. It asks you to think deeply and act deliberately. And if you found value in this journey, if these ideas made you pause, reflect, or question something you've always accepted, then take a moment to support this work. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, Audiobook Library, and stay connected for more deep, unscripted ideas that challenge the way we think about money, freedom, and life itself.